WCNC Charlotte. This is Flashpoint, where power and politics collide and the tough questions get asked and answered.
Thanks for joining us here on Flashpoint. I'm Ben Thompson. By the way, happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. Not only is it Father's Day, but it's also Juneteenth, a holiday that commemorates the end of slavery here in America. But it's one that really, honestly, has only gained national recognition in the last few years.
After 4 bloody years, the Union defeated the Confederacy to win the Civil War and abolish slavery in April 1865. There were nearly 4 million slaves in the U.S. at the time. Union armies began marching through the southern states, freeing thousands of slaves each day. The news took months to reach Texas, the westernmost state in the Confederacy. On June 19, 1865, Major General Gordon Granger and 2,000 Union troops rode into Galveston and told slaves of their freedom. Granger's words spread through Texas. All at once, slaves found out the war was over and they were free. Their joyous, spontaneous celebration gave birth to what we now know as Juneteenth. Juneteenth, a combination of the words June and 19th, commemorates when the last enslaved people in the South were finally set free. Many slaves were met with violence or death when they tried to leave, yet the promise of freedom extinguished that fear and fueled generations to come. Former slaves gathered on Juneteenth the next year and the year after that. And over the decades, black communities observed the holiday with festive family gatherings, parades, and barbecues. Following the summer of protests in the wake of George Floyd's murder in 2020, private companies made Juneteenth a permanent paid holiday for their workers. In 2021, Congress passed legislation to make it a federal holiday. President Biden signed it into law days later. Juneteenth, a celebration of independence, the day all Americans were truly free.
Joining us now, Dr. Crystal Eddins, assistant professor in the Department of Africana Studies in UNC Charlotte. Professor, thanks for coming on. We appreciate it.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
All right, we're 1 year into Juneteenth being a federal holiday. Why is that important?
I think it's important because the history of Juneteenth kind of reminds us of the longstanding struggle for Black freedom in the United States. The holiday symbolizes June 19th, 1865, the day that African Americans in Galveston, Texas, learned that the Civil War had ended, and that 2 months earlier, and that the Emancipation Proclamation was in effect, which freed 250,000 former slaves in Texas. So the date marked the beginning of this long-standing tradition of celebrations, making Juneteenth the oldest holiday that commemorates the end of slavery in the United States. And I think that Juneteenth remains a critically important time for us as a society to honor the lives of Black Americans who were enslaved in this country, the contributions they made, and the legacies that they left.
Yeah, and I know there's sort of a back and forth and a bit of a controversy in that July 4th is often called Independence Day, but in a way, Juneteenth is its own.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that what you're speaking to goes to the heart of our questions around how we tell the story of the history of this country. We are now seeing a resistance, I think, to the full and accurate accounting of the history of slavery and its impact on our society today. There are folks who, want to ban critical race theory, the 1619 Project, and other books. We're seeing this in other states. And it's really kind of motivated by these kind of long-lasting white supremacist ideologies, essentially, that misinterpret the history of slavery and really kind of don't want us to fully recognize that slavery really does sit at the heart of who we are as a nation. But Juneteenth helps us to remember this truth. And so incorporating that into the timeline of the holidays that we recognize, I think, is important.
Along with this sort of new attention that Juneteenth has gotten in the last few years, it's become more commercialized in ways. Walmart gotten in trouble with a Juneteenth ice cream this past year. The thought is people should be supporting Black-owned businesses instead. Talk about that.
Sure, yeah. Companies like Walmart and Dollar Tree were kind of caught red-handed, if you will, attempting to capitalize on the holiday by marketing Juneteenth products to Black consumers, like ice cream and paper plates and things like that. Really, without any type of context or any type of depthful engagement with issues around racial justice. And so, yeah, the kind of commercialization of Juneteenth, I think, is problematic. But there are other companies and corporations that are, recognizing the holiday. And so I think that, they're doing this as in a way to kind of help with addressing the questions around diversity and racial justice and equity that have kind of been reignited, or the calls that for these things have been reignited in the past 2 years since the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement and the murder of George Floyd. But yes, absolutely, supporting Black-owned businesses and companies, and supporting Black workers, supporting Black consumers are all an important aspect of, what Juneteenth represents.
You're talking about corporations and businesses. What about on the person-to-person level? For white folks out there who want to support their Black friends, and what are the best ways to sort of mark Juneteenth? What are the do's and don'ts?
Well, that's an interesting question. I think that people, celebrate Juneteenth in various ways, especially within the African American community. Many folks choose to celebrate by, coming together with family and friends and just sitting together to reflect. But I think that, reflection and learning is a great way for many Black Americans as well as white Americans to begin to really think about what our country is, who we are as a nation, and how the histories of slavery, continue to live with us, and to really reflect on what it means to be white. I think that's probably a great way for many white Americans to start to embrace these histories and to embrace the positive and maybe not so positive aspects of whiteness, and think about it in critical ways and begin to dismantle it.
I think you said reflection and learning. I think reflection and learning would go a long way for a lot of issues today, for all of us to do a little bit more of that. Juneteenth is nothing new. What do you think was really the impetus for this? What do you think was changed the conversation, changed the narrative in the last few years?
Sure. Well, so there have been, again, these longstanding traditions and celebrations that have spread across Black America since 1865. But in recent years, there's been a woman named Opal Lee. She's been mobilizing for years to make Juneteenth a national holiday, and her campaign gained 1.5 million signatures in support of the holiday. And recognition finally came last year when Congress passed a bill to designate Juneteenth as a federal holiday, and President Biden signed a proclamation of observation. But in reading that proclamation that President Biden signed, it spoke to the importance of embracing equity, equality, and justice amid the long freedom struggle in this country against racial violence and against more insidious systemic forms of racism. So the Black Lives Matter movement of 2020, as well as last year was the 100th anniversary of the 1921 Tulsa Race Massacre. And this was mentioned in the proclamation. And so I think in tandem, these two things, and as well as the ongoing activism, kind of were the momentum to push for better understanding of the legacies of slavery and Jim Crow, and put the federal holiday designation kind of at the forefront of that conversation.
Dr. Crystal Eddins. Doctor, thanks for coming on and talking to us about it. But it was a really important topic, and as I mentioned, here's hoping for more reflection on learning for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
More Flashpoint after this.